Hi again, everyone. Welcome back to Enjoy English School. I'm Bruce.
I'm Antony.
Today is my favorite. It's a test. I love tests for you, not for me. This is our Cloze test. You know the drill. You know what you're supposed to do. We have a sentence, and there's a word or phrase missing, and we give you 4 choices, and which one fits best. There we go with the Cloze test.
没错，我们今天要做的是克漏字，对不对？老师最喜欢克漏字单元了，还有很多其他各式各样的那种考试。我也觉得好奇怪，我从来没有喜欢考试。不过没关系，不要害怕，因为我们今天会带着你走过这一切，然后知道一些考试的技巧。那今天要讲的主题呢是电话恐惧症，好，那英文叫做 Telephobia。
Now, tele is from telephone, telegraph, television. It means distance.Phobia means fear, F-E-A-R. You're afraid of, in this case, telephone. You are worried if someone calls you on the telephone.
Yeah, 所以在这里的话，你会看到 tele， 老师刚刚特别解释到 tele 其实是跟距离很远这个字有关的，好，就是 distance。那这边的话 phobia 指的是你的恐惧。那如果说今天你提到 telephobia 这个字，其实我是这次才看到的哦，之前的话我没有听过，我只有听过比较新的一个字叫做 nomophobia， 就是 no mobile phone 的 nomo， 然后后面配上 phobia， 指的是你很害怕你的手机没有在身边。那这边的话，这个是比较新的，是你很害怕打电话这件事情。
Now, one that is not very recent, it's well known forever, is acrophobia. Many, if not most people, are afraid of heights. They don't want to climb up a ladder. They are afraid to look out of a window from a tall building. Very common. Acro means height. A-C-R-O. And then add phobia. Acrophobia is one of hundreds of phobias that,some people have.
没错，就是惧高症的意思啊。这边特别注意一下这个 acrophobia. If you want to say 我有惧高症，你可以说 I'm afraid of heights. 要特别记得那个 heights 的话，要用复数的形态去表达，它的拼法是 H-E-I-G-H-T， 然后再加上 S. Afraid of heights. I'm afraid of heights. 就是我有惧高症。
Equals I have acrophobia.
也可以说 I have acrophobia 来表达我有惧高症哦。
不是 I am acrophobia. I have acrophobia.
没错。
I don't. Anyway, telephobia. Let's take a look. Now that we've introduced the topic, we'll take a short break and come back with the first paragraph, which also has the first Cloze test.
Telephobia.When your phone rings, do you ever jump out of your seat because the sound scares you? When someone calls you while you're busy with something, do you get angry at that person for interrupting you? If you've had these experiences before, you probably have telephobia. Nowadays, people are usually no more than a meter away from their phones at all times.Even so, a lot of people suffer from telephobia. This is a new social anxiety that is linked to the fear and avoidance of phone conversations. With a traditional phone call, people must communicate with only their voices. It's hard to know exactly what people mean without social cues like body language, gestures, or eye contact.The most effective way to get over telephobia is to start making calls. The more phone calls a person makes, the less scary a new phone conversation will seem. People suffering from telephobia can consider calling their friends who will be sympathetic to their anxiety. Eventually, a person with telephobia might not feel anxious talking to strangers or making business contacts on a phone.If this method doesn't work, it might be best to seek professional help. Getting rid of telephobia doesn't happen overnight, but talking on the phone is the best way to overcome it. As they say, practice makes perfect.
Okay, our first sentence. When your phone rings, do you ever jump out of your seat because the sound scares you? I don't think that's very common. Most people can't wait to find out who's on the phone, but just the opposite. Some people are afraid of being called. They have telephobia.
所以这里的话，第一句话呢，他就告诉你说，如果你有 telephobia 的话呢，你可能会出现什么样的状况？他是说 ，When your phone rings， 当你的这个电话声响起的时候 ，Do you ever jump out of your seat？ 会不会吓到你跳起来 ？Because the sound scares you， 你会不会被那个声音叮的声音吓到？我的话，我常常被那个其他就在捷运上头有的那个 line 的声音。那一下子声音叮咚，那声音很大声的话，其实是真的会让我有点抓狂的感觉。但是如果说今天这种事情发生在你身上的话呢，你说不定就有 telephobia。
When someone calls you while you are busy with something, do you get angry at that person for blank you? This is another situation. Does this happen to you? You're busy doing some work, the phone rings, and then that makes you angry, and you don't care who's calling you. You're angry at the person for blanking you. Now here we have 4 interverbs. Interpreting. That doesn't work here. Interpreting is he speaks Taiwanese, and I translate it, I interpret it into English. Interrupting is to break someone's attention. And it usually bothers somebody when this happens. That looks good. Interviewing? Were you interviewing someone and the phone rang? Very unlikely. Interacting is to be involved with somebody. Well, here you would only get angry if you were busy working and someone interrupted you. RUPT, 这个根 is to break. So that would make you angry. Choose B. When someone calls you while you are busy with something, do you get angry at that person for interrupting you?
Yeah, 没错，在这里的话 interrupting 就是打断你的意思。所以刚刚提到这个 RUPT 这里面的这个字根呢，它就有 break 的意思，就打断你现在在做的事情。所以这句话呢，他就说了，如果说有人打电话给你，然后你正在忙的时候，你会不会生气？对那个人生气？因为他打断了你的工作。在这里的话，我们选 B, interrupting.
If you've had these experiences before, you probably have telephobia. The experiences are listed here are 2. You're afraid. It shocks you when your phone rings. Or secondly, you were doing something, someone calls you, and that makes you angry. Those are the 2 experiences. If that happens to you a lot, then you have telephobia.
然后呢，他用这种方式去跟你讲说，你来确认一下有没有这2种经验。还说，如果呢你曾经有过这2种经验的话呢，说不定你就有我们这边今天的主题电话恐惧症哦。
Okay, we'll take a short break and we come back and have the next 2 Cloze test items. Welcome back. Okay, first sentence of the second paragraph. Nowadays, people are usually no more than a meter away from their phones at all times. Nowadays, these days, the modern period, people have their phones, mobile phones, close to them, no more than a meter away from them. Maybe they put it on the desk and walk over somewhere to pick up a book. But it's usually right on them, so they're never far away from their phone.
没错，所以这里的话，第一句话讲说 nowadays 到现今呢 people are usually no more than a meter away from their phones at all times. 这个让我想到说 keep their phones at hand， 就是靠近他随手可以拿到的这种地方，距离不会超过1公尺，然后就是很近，要伸手拿得到。大部分人都是现在用这种方式去对待他们的手机的。
Our second sentence begins with our second Cloze item, blank. A lot of people suffer from telephobia. In the first sentence we gave, or in the first paragraph, we gave you a couple examples of it. A lot of people, we are told, suffer from telephobia. So how should we start that sentence? With even so, before long, as usual, or for example. Well, a lot of people suffer from something. This is not an example. Before long, we don't have a time period here that we're talking about. B is also not good. As usual would not work here because we're not talking about something that happens all the time or often. Even so, hopefully you know the preposition despite or despite this, D-E-S-P-I-T-E. We're not going to consider the first thing because the second thing is more important or more usual. So choose even so. Even so refers to the information in the first sentence. Despite this, a lot of people suffer from telephobia, even though so many people are so close to their phones and carry their phones with them. Why would you carry your phone if it frightens you?
没错，所以在这里的话呢，你就可以注意到说，在前句跟后句之间的关系是什么？即便许许多多人手机不离身，即便如此，还是有很多人会因为电话恐惧症而受苦受难，对不对？所以在这里的话，他讲到两个相反的概念，答案就要选 A。Even so， 即便我们知道前面这件事情，老师该补充了另外一个说法叫 despite this。despite 这个字，老师刚刚也帮各位拼过了，它是一个介系词，就是虽然的意思。
This is a new social anxiety. It's new because mobile phones are new. Not to many of you, you were born with a mobile phone, but for many people, it's something new. And so it's a new social anxiety. Telephobia is relatively new. Anxiety means you worry about something, you're afraid of something. Adjective is anxious, A-N-X-I-O-U-S. A-N-X-I-O-U-S. We usually feel anxious before an important test. That's natural, that's normal. This anxiety is linked to the fear and avoidance of phone conversations. Even though people carry that phone even to bed with them, they actually worry about or feel anxious about who's calling me? When will the phone ring? They worry about it.
没有错。所以这里老师先花了一点时间说明了一下 anxiety 焦虑这件事情，也给我们这个字的形容词 anxious 的拼法。在这边的话，我们看到这句话，他说 This is a new social anxiety， 这是一种新的这种社交的焦虑症。That is linked to the fear， 好，是跟什么有关？跟恐惧什么事情有关 ？And avoidance of phone conversations， 意思就是指跟人家用电话交流、沟通、讲事情，他想辦法去避免，甚至有點害怕，跟這件事情有關係。
With a traditional phone call, that means not mobile phone. The telephone is somewhere in the house. You may be in another room. People must communicate with only their voices. When you use a phone, unless you are looking at the person and talking to them on a mobile phone, if it's a regular telephone, you can't see them.
没错，所以这边的话你看到了，如果是传统的电话的话呢 ，people must communicate with only their voices。以前不要忘记，没有什么视讯，对不对？你只能用你的声音去表达你的情感，然后他们只能用声音去沟通，去传达他们的感情，这样子。
It's hard to know exactly what people mean blank social cues like body language, gestures, or eye contact. We're talking about talking on a traditional phone. You cannot see the person you're talking with. So, what do we put in our third blank? What people mean blank social cues. Over social cues, without social cues, until social cues, or through social cues. Well, it has to be without because you cannot see their body language, you cannot see their gestures, nor do you have eye contact, which is a lot of our communication, real communication.
没错，所以这边的话提到这个 social cues 就是这种社交的一些线索，比方说我今天我可以从你的表情可以知道说你到底是怎么想的，然后这句话我要怎么诠释，是在开玩笑呢还是认真呢，对不对？所以在这边的话我们说 without social cues， 所以在这里的话 it is hard to know exactly what people mean， 在没有这种社交线索，像是这种身体语言啦，或者是手势啦，或甚至是眼神的接触这样的社交线索的情况下，很难知道对方真切的意思要表达什么。
So we choose without. Without seeing another person, we don't always know what they're going to, how they really feel about something. Okay, we finished that paragraph. We have one more to go, but we're going to take a short break first. Okay, we're ready now for the final paragraph. The most effective way, the easiest way, or the way which will find success the best, is to get over, the way to get over telephobia. What's the best way to challenge it and beat it? Is to start making calls. Use the telephone. Don't wait for people to call you, you call them.
所以说这边的话，我们主动出击是一个解决问题的办法哦。所以你看到第一句话，他讲说 the most effective way to do something， 做什么事情最有效率的办法 to get over telephobia， 要克服这种电话恐惧症，最好的办法就是 is to start making calls， 就你自己打电话出去就好了嘛。
The more phone calls a person makes, notice we say make a call. Of course, you can just say call someone on the phone, but you make a phone call, the less scary. It won't seem so scary or frightening to you. If you have telephobia, it seems as though these calls are scary. Well, if you practice something, you feel more comfortable with it. You make the calls.
没错，所以这里的话 the more phone calls a person makes， 这边用的是 the more 句型哦，就是你打的电话次数越多呢 the less scary， 意思就是某件事情就变得比较没有那么恐怖。什么事情 A new phone conversation will seem， 所以说如果新的这种电话，你打电话跟人家讲电话这件事情就会越来越不可怕。
Okay, next sentence.People suffering from telephobia can consider blank their friends who will be sympathetic to their anxiety. To suffer from is to have telephobia. It makes you anxious. You can consider, this is grammar, you can consider A, calls, B, called, C, calling, or D, call. Well, of course, we want C, calling here. To consider doing something.And that is to call your friends who realize you have this problem, this phobia, and they feel sorry for you, and they want to help you.
没错，所以这里的话考点是在用 consider 后面接的时候，你可以 consider my proposal 可以是名词 consider doing something 好，这时候就是用动名词的方式来表达一件事情，所以他就说 people suffering from telephobia 会有这种电话恐惧症的人呢can consider 可以考虑做这件事情，所以这里答案我们选 C calling their friends who will be sympathetic to their anxiety 去打电话给朋友，而这些朋友他具有什么样的特质呢？他们会能够了解你有这种社交恐惧症，会更有耐心的去陪你度过这一段，陪着你练习打电话给人家。
Eventually, finally, after some time, a person with telephobia might not feel anxious talking to strangers or making business contacts on a phone. You get used to something, and then you don't feel it's strange or scary anymore.
没错，在这边他提到说 eventually 当到了最后呢，经过练习之后 a person with telephobia might not feel anxious. 我们刚刚提到 anxiety 的形容词，对不对？这边就出现了。到最后呢，他们就算有这种电话恐惧症，也不会觉得这么那么害怕了。什么样的情况呢？ Talking to strangers or making business contacts on a phone. 用电话呢去跟陌生人讲话，或者是呢在那个工作上面去用电话去联络公事，他们就不会这么害怕，这么焦虑了。
If this method doesn't work,calling friends who understand that you have telephobia, it might be best to seek is to find professional help. And this will be a doctor of psychiatry. We don't have to spell that. But people who are trained to help people who have phobias to understand them and to deal with them.
没错，所以如果说这些招数都没有办法有效的话，没有办法帮到你的话 if this method doesn't work 就是没有效 it might be best to seek professional help 意思就是指你不妨去寻求专业的协助会更好。
Okay, our final close item, blank. telephobia doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't just occur suddenly. But talking on the phone is the best way to overcome it. You deal with your own fear by calling people, first people who you trust and who understand you, and then finally maybe business calls. You get used to it. And let me finish now because this says it perfectly. As they say, people say, practice makes perfect. The more you do something, the better at it you are. And if you're afraid of something but you deal with it, after some time, you may no longer feel afraid.
没错，所以在这边的话就是熟能生巧，对不对？经过练习之后就会更加的完美，做得会更好。所以在这边这个地方我们碰到了第5格，对不对？什么 Telephobia doesn't happen overnight？ 我们先讲一下这句话，它的意思是说 Telephobia 这件事情呢，不是一朝一夕就这样突然就出来了，但是怎么样？Talking on the phone is the best way to overcome it. 要解决它最好的办法呢，就是不断的练习哦。那这边的话去做，就像他们说的，练习了就会完美，慢慢的熟能生巧。
Okay, so for number 5, now that we understand the last 2 sentences, which is the best choice? A, putting up with. B, dropping out of. C, getting rid of. Or D, looking down upon telephobia.Well, the person is trying to get well. People don't want to be anxious all the time about telephone calls. So our best choice is C, get rid of. The grammar here is getting rid of. It is to push away, is to stop being afraid. That will be to get rid of a phobia.
没有错，所以这里的话 doesn't happen overnight， 下面讲的东西是前面这一整块。如果你要摆脱这种社交那种电话恐惧症的话，没有办法一下子就摆脱我不怕了，没有这种事，要经过练习。所以这边的话，答案选 C。Getting rid of telephobia 就是要摆脱这样的恐惧症，并非一朝一夕，但是勤加练习一定会有最好的结果。
Okay, that's it for the text.We'll be back in a moment in order for us to go through our review. Okay, we have only 4 items for you in our review. The first is suffer from. That means something hurts you, it pains you, it makes you afraid.suffer
from 就是受苦于什么什么，后面常常会接一些疾病啊什么的，让你感到很不舒服的，就可以用 suffer from 后面接病。
Also in that paragraph is the noun plural, cues. A cue is a piece of information that helps you understand something.cues
就是那种线索，尤其是帮助你知道事情的发展，或者是知道对方的意图那样子的线索，就叫 cues。In
the next paragraph, get over means to conquer, which means to get rid of.
Conquer 或者是这边讲的 get over your fear 或者是什么，就是克服某件事情。
And our last item, sympathetic, means that you have a warm feeling and a helpful feeling towards some other person.
所以 sympathetic 这个形容词呢，通常讲 be sympathetic to something，对不对？就是知道能够同理，能够理解，甚至是同情这样子的一个心理感受，它能够陪着你这种感觉。
Okay, that's it for today's Cloze test lesson. Hope you learned something from it and enjoyed it too. Till the next time, bye-bye.